Hello, Chris Monk, owner of Highline Guitars. So today I'm working on a new guitar. I'm calling this one the Osiris, and I'll save you a trip to Wikipedia. Osiris is the Egyptian god of the underworld, so I thought it was kind of a cool name. It's easy to pronounce, easy to spell. But at this point, I've cut the body and the neck and the fretboard. I've done all the initial hand carving, and now I'm ready to start doing all the final sanding. But I got to thinking about one of the most controversial subjects in the whole world of building guitars, and that is the effect of wood on tone. As you know, that's a subject that gets people all hot and bothered. So I thought I would shoot a short video kind of explaining my perspective on the subject. So I actually have two different perspectives on it. The first one is, this is kind of based on research I've done into the science and the physics of how guitars work. And basically, when you pluck a guitar string, it vibrates. And any part of the guitar that vibrates is probably having some kind of an effect on the tone. And the question isn't, does it affect tone? The question should be, and what people should actually be arguing is, can we perceive what that effect on tone is? And the way I look at a guitar, it's a collection of components and materials, and each one of those has an effect on the tone. And you can actually list those out it's a list of hierarchy, from the most important components to the least. Now, what I'm talking about are the components that you can change in a guitar. Once the guitar is built, you really can't change the scale length, and you really can't change the wood that much. You can plan that out from the beginning before you start to build, but once you've got it finished, the components that have the most effect on tone that can be changed, at the top of the list would be pickups, followed by the electronic controls like the capacitor and the potentiometer. Those things can be changed and have a dramatic effect on tone. You can also change the strings on the guitar and affect the tone. And that's a little bit more complicated. That's the sort of thing where to do that, you have to contact the string manufacturers and tell them what you're trying to do and take their advice and try it out yourself. But as far as the wood affecting the tone, it does, but it may not affect it to a point that you can actually perceive it. That's kind of up in the air. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. But that's where my second perspective kind of comes into play. My feeling is, if you're building guitars for customers and trying to make a living doing it, you have to give some consideration to every component and material on the guitar and its potential effect on tone. If you don't, you're doing a disservice to your customer, especially if your customers are hypercritical about the tone of their guitars. If a customer asks what kind of wood you should use in a build to achieve the tone that they're after, you've got to give that some consideration. Now, in most situations, we tend to look at the tone that wood gives us based on a species. For example, this guitar is African mahogany, and we know from experience that mahogany is supposed to give a guitar a warmer tone, whereas maple is supposed to give it a brighter tone. Now, that's pretty generic. And it's a broad way to look at it. Experienced luthiers will tell you that it actually comes down to individual boards. And for those of you out there who are rolling your eyes right now and saying, well, that doesn't matter, wood doesn't affect tone. I'm talking about keeping your customers satisfied by providing them with the best options for their builds. You may not agree that it affects tone, and I'm telling you that from a physics standpoint, it does, but it may not be so pronounced as to be detectable. I do feel, however, that you have to consider this when shaping the tone of a guitar for your customer. And if you don't consider it, your customer is liable not to be as impressed with what you're able to do for them. And if you're a guitar player who is considering some luthiers to have them build a guitar for you, and if tone is really important to you, one of the questions you need to ask the luthier is, what kind of wood should you use in a guitar build? And if they tell you wood doesn't have any effect on tone, politely end the conversation as soon as you can and start looking for a different luthier, because they're not going to have your best interest at heart. You really need to use a luthier who's going to explore all the possibilities, even if they may not have as much impact as you might think. So that's basically my perspectives on the whole Tonewood controversy, and I know that there are probably going to be a lot of comments down below that are going to incite riots possibly, and if that's the case, I'm going to continue to look at the comments, and if anyone gets nasty, I will not only delete their comments, but I'll report them to the overlords at YouTube. So just keep that in mind. And that's basically what my thoughts are on the subject. Now I'm going to get back to sanding this guitar because I've got a lot of work ahead of me.